Everybody, welcome back to Nate Reads Diversely. This is going to be another DID related video. The DID content, will keep coming. It's difficult for us to film just because it's hard to talk about because in our case, like our condition was caused by a lot of trauma. So like it's kind of by definition, it's like re-traumatizing to talk about. It's something that I still want to do though, because people need to know how to write characters with DID accurately. Some ground rules before we start. I am going to be sharing this video is going to be all about conflict between alters and like what that can look like in a story. We're going to be sharing examples from our own system. We'll demonstrate what we're talking about. We're only going to be naming alters who have already fused, who are no longer around, because frankly I don't trust the internet and I don't want to get into a situation where like, we name a current alter and then the internet pressures us to front that alter even though that might not be me. As Nate, I'm letting you know that we're not going to be sharing names of alters who are still currently here. We're only going to be naming alters who have already fused. So when you're writing a DID system, I would actually recommend that you flesh out each alter individually and at least have some idea of like what drives them, what their basic personality is, and like what their goals are. Because when you're writing a DID system, like even if the system is not cognizant that they are a system, each alter has to be written as a separate character because that's what they are in the system. Like, I mean, they're not going to be experiencing same things as the host all the time. Every alter is not going to remember the same things because when you switch in, like it's dissociation, like that's what it is. So when you're writing a DID system, like even though all of those characters like share the same body and are experiencing some of the same things in their environment, they're not experiencing the same things at the same time. They're like taking information in different ways. They're responding to information in different ways based on their personality and like their personal goals. So like every alter needs to be like their own individual character. Just a recipe for conflict. So like alters are going to have different goals and they could unwittingly or on purpose undo the work that the host is trying to do, or their alters jobs are more complicated because they're kind of going in different directions with the body and they just like so that's why if there is a way for alters to communicate within the system, definitely have that established. Sometimes people are cognizant that they are systems and sometimes they're not. Kind of depends on what kind of story you want to tell. There is going to be like struggle for control because the body is one resource, so like if everyone kind of has like a different idea of like how to govern that resource, there's bound to be conflict. Alters having different goals from each other is a cause for conflict. Another cause for conflict, like if and even if alters share a goal, they're going to have different ideas of how to reach that goal. An example that we're going to bring up later has to do with college. So like let's say you have a host and they have a certain career path. They want to be a psychologist. And so they got accepted to 5 different colleges that have good psychology programs, and they could be in conflict with another alter over like what college to go to. Think about alter's goal is individually and then like how that could come in conflict with like another alter's goals. And if they have the same goal, what are their different ideas in achieving that goal? So like before you even get into how alters like relate to each other in the system, I would suggest getting a handle on all of them individually first, like figure out what drives them, figure out what their basic personality traits are, figure out what their goals are, and kind of put them all together and like see how they would get along or not. So think about like why did this alter appear in the system in the first place? With each alter, you have to think about like why that alter formed in the system in the first place because every alter has like their own function. The host experienced some type of childhood trauma that split their personality into different sections, and each section of that personality had a specific function in taking care of an area of that person's life. So think about who your host is and like what happened in their life and like what responsibilities they needed to take care of in their life that they couldn't take care of on their own because of, their trauma. So think about like why each alter exists in the system in the first place, and then also why that altar exists in the story, because like you also have to think about the narrative purpose of including the that altar in there. If your overall if the overall theme of your story is like healing from the trauma that caused the DID in the first place, then you could show how certain alters choose to behave, how they present themselves outside of the system, if they have like different goals in, different ideas of how to achieve that. How is that alter going to be moving the plot forward? And if they're like undoing other alters like work in trying to get that done, it depend on what kind of story you want to tell. So like think about the function that they have in the story. Like are they going against the host in some way? Are they does the host and an alter like have a common enemy? You could also have a situation where like different alters have different ideas over an antagonist in the story. Like maybe one alter trusts them, another alter doesn't, and they're having ideological conflicts about that. Think about what their triggers are. Systems like share a lot of triggers, but each alter could also have a trigger of their own. What their personality traits are, and like how those kind of compare and contrast to each other, like how that creates relationship or conflict. So in order to demonstrate this point and show you examples of like how complex this can get, we're going to be describing three past alters, each of them individually, and then explaining certain conflicts that they went through. All three ultimately integrated. And I have to this note about integration before we get into it. Our system is like mostly completely integrated at this point. We're like one or two steps behind what Multiplicity and me ended up doing. Integration happens to be the best thing for our system. However, I have to make the point that nobody should ever be pressured to, whether you know a system in your own life or you're writing about a system, personal agency behind it. So, like, it would not be good representation, for example, if if an outside force was pressuring that system to integrate, if that wasn't what was best for the system. Like integration happens to be what's best for our system, that does not mean that it's the same for all systems. Functional multiplicity is a thing. Agency over the system's own life has to be up to the system. It can't be up to an outside force like that, because that takes away research with integration and functional multiplicity. There are lots of people on TikTok and YouTube like actively living it right now. So I'm sure if you're watching this video, I'm sure you've already seen examples of that. So now let's get into three alters, past alters in our system, and I'm going to describe each of them individually, and then I'm going to describe what their relationships between them were like. Our past host was called Tosh because our birth name was Natasha. If you watch the NaNoWriMo encouragement video that we posted, that was Tosh. Um, you know, Anxious, sweet, uh, kind, insecure, like not really, just kind of like not as sure of herself. She like even though we were like a closeted trans person at that time, Tosh was not aware that our gender was male. So like even though she was like friendly and sweet and anxious and stuff, like she wasn't the best at like making decisions or conflict avoidant. And so if there was something that needed to be done that like Tosh couldn't handle, Dmitri would step in, and Dmitri was the equivalent of like a primary protector. And I'm putting quotations around it because like this terminology didn't exist while we were growing up. So Dimitri would be the equivalent of like what a primary protector would be nowadays. So Dimitri contrast the way that Tosh talked, in the NaNoWriMo video with how I'm speaking, Nate, how I'm speaking right now. Like I'm speaking with Dimitri's like register of voice, like his cadence, except like I speak with a little bit more softness than Dimitri used to. Dimitri was very cold, calculating, by the book, like regarded interactions as transactions. Tosh and Dimitri were basically sharing the body, like most of the time. If there was something that Tosh was like too overwhelmed to handle, then Dimitri would step in and handle it. Whether that would be like taking care of our little sister or going to a certain class that was triggering for us, like math or something. Like we were terrible at math, undiagnosed dyscalculia. So Dimitri was like the one who kind of managed thing. He as I'm describing him to you, I mean, it would be easy to think that like that Tosh would be like rebellious and like and want to have conflict with Dmitri, but that wasn't the case at all. I mean, Tosh and Dmitri loved each other like twins. Dmitri was, I mean, of course, Dmitri didn't really respect Tosh very much because because Tosh wasn't able to handle the things that Dmitri could handle. So Dmitri kind of had like this, obviously, I can handle this better than you can, so let me step in and do it. But it wasn't, yeah, there was a power dynamic there. Like Dimitri did have more power than Tosh did, but Tosh was the one who was good at making friends. Tosh was the one who was good at relating to people. So it's like they both had their like strengths and weaknesses kind of thing. We talked about in a previous video, there were friends who were friends with Dimitri because because they were having a lot of problems in life and like they needed someone strong to lean on. So like there were friends of ours who were friends with Dimitri and not Tosh. There were friends of ours who were friends with Tosh and not Dimitri. So already like just from those two examples, I'm sure that you're already kind of thinking in your head like, oh, what could the relationship between my characters, the system that you're writing, like what could the relationship between the host and the primary protector be if they have a primary protector at all? I said in the other video, not all DID systems follow the same formula. Like, we're not going to have like the same roles as everyone on like as a specific person on TikTok or something. Now the third one I'm going to talk about is his name was Sergio. Sergio was the equivalent of like our persecutor, someone who absorbed all of the anger and the rage that we weren't dealing with and basically turned it into and put it into working out, took the hit, I guess, of like the abuse that we were going through, was the one who would act out if things weren't fair. Just from describing these three people, it's like you can see how like why Tosh and Dimitri might get along, but Dimitri and Sergio absolutely did not get along at all. Dimitri was very like by the book. We have to mask, we have certain goals that we need to achieve, and like we can't. He was afraid of Sergio coming out because he was afraid that Sergio would like beat someone up and like we would get arrested, and then if we had a criminal record, then we wouldn't be able to be a teacher, and so he was very strict about Sergio not coming out. So there was always conflict between Dimitri and Sergio because Sergio didn't like being told what to do, and Dimitri, that was literally Dimitri's job in the system, is he told people what to do. So they didn't like each other at all. They integrated not liking each other. But, interestingly enough, Dimitri integrated way earlier than Sergio did. And I'll probably do a whole separate video on that because that's a different writing the emotion of aftermath of integration is gonna be its own video because there's a lot to that. So as you can see, like just from describing these three people, Tosh, nervous, friendly, wants everyone to get along, relates to other people, is nice to other people, and like do what she needs to do to become a teacher and have friends and stuff like that. Dimitri's goal was that Tosh was doing everything that she was supposed to earn the degree and to care of our sister. And then, Sergio, his goal was to get even. He wanted to do something with all the rage that Dimitri and Tosh weren't dealing with. In just describing these three people, like each of these people have different. Dimitri and Tosh like may have had the same goal, but they were reaching that goal in different ways. And Dimitri and Sergio would often have conflicts because Sergio's goal was to unleash the rage, so to get even, and Dimitri was doing everything that he could to like make sure that Sergio didn't come out because he was worried about consequences for the whole body. I'm going to describe a fight that happened between Tosh and Dmitri. It was a catastrophic vying for control. So we're going to be describing two separate conflicts that like these three alters had with each other. The first one is going to be between Tosh and Dmitri, and the second is going to be also between Tosh and Dmitri, but the subject of conversation was Sergio. So it's our senior year of high school, and we were in the mental hospital for a significant part of junior year. Up until this point, Dimitri had been like pretty hands off with Tosh because like it's because Tosh got results. Tosh was the one who was able to make friendships. Tosh was the one who was good at relating to people. Dmitri was getting increasingly more frustrated with Tosh because Tosh hadn't applied to any colleges. Dmitri was like freaking out because he was like, well, how are we going to achieve this goal of being a teacher if you're not going to apply to colleges? That doesn't make any sense. Tosh was overwhelmed. Tosh didn't really want to deal with it. So Dmitri was like getting frustrated with her, and he was saying like, okay, well, clearly you're not going to deal with this. So like, he basically, what he tried to do was he tried to become the host, and that was a really bad move for the whole system, because the system essentially fell apart, and that's why we were kept in a mental hospital for the majority of senior year, because he was vying for control. He wanted Tosh to basically step down as the host, and um, was trying to be the one to take care of everything, because he felt that Tosh wasn't holding up her end of the bargain in order to achieve, their shared goals. Eventually, they did work it out. Tosh and Dmitri, like Tosh promised to take care of the things that she needed to take care of, and Dmitri obviously learned that hostile takeover is not good for any system. So that could probably be something in your book. I don't know. So they had to reconcile. They had to work it out. Tosh didn't trust Dmitri for a while after that, and Dmitri had to kind of like let Tosh handle certain things that he was used to handling for her. And as you can probably imagine, Tosh was very much emotionally dependent on Dmitri. Like, Dmitri was the one who took care of all the things that she was too overwhelmed and mentally ill to take care of. So it was wrong of Dimitri to try to control what Tosh was doing, and like, interfere with her personal agency. So they had to kind of spend the rest of that year like reconciling. And they did. Dimitri didn't integrate until end of 2020. That story is going to be its own video, because I want to make clear that like that when alters integrate, it's a very very like emotional process, because it's basically dying. Like, you have to like, it's basically akin to like mourning a loved one who's passed away. Sort of, kind of. Like, we'll talk about it. These videos are hard to film. Like, it just is what it is. They are. The second conflict that I want to talk about was also between Tosh and Dmitri. It was an ideological conflict. Like, there wasn't any actual like hostile takeover of the system or anything like that. Like, there wasn't damage, by someone trying to front when weren't naturally supposed to. Like, as we got older, Tosh was starting to gently argue with Dimitri over things. I mean, she was very much like the peacemaker. Like, she really just wanted everyone to get along. But as we got older, Tosh was starting to like question Dimitri on things. And one of the things that she was starting to question him on, this was like in college. Why do you sideline Sergio so much? Because, Sergio, even though, yeah, okay, like he can be dangerous, when he's like on his justice quest, and when he's like all vindictive and stuff, but when he's not like that, like, he's actually a really good strategist, and he gives people opportunities to prove themselves, like, which is something that Dimitri never did. So like, that was always something that Tosh like appreciated about Sergio, because Sergio was also a strong leader like Dimitri, but Dimitri sucked at delegating. Like, he didn't like giving up control. Sergio was good at like, okay, you're good at that. Okay, like, you handle that. Prove to me that you can handle this, and then we'll talk about like hiring you. Basically, like, he was a much fairer boss than Dimitri was, even though he was angrier. So it's kind of like a one time in college, like, Tosh brought that up to Dimitri and was like, hey, you're sidelining someone we could be bringing into like this boardroom, of this proverbial war meeting room, how we're going to handle certain things. Like, he's a good strategist. He gives people a chance. It's like, why can't you give him why can't he come and like sit with us and like, discuss things? if we're having like some kind of conflict. And Dimitri was like, absolutely not. If we let him front, then he's just gonna like get us arrested, and he's gonna ruin our life. And so Dimitri was afraid of the anger that Sergio held on to. He didn't trust Sergio. Sergio didn't trust him. So like he was not comfortable giving up control, letting Sergio front. And so whenever Sergio would front, it would be because like, something catastrophic was happening. Dimitri had to like put out a proverbial fire somewhere else, and then, Sergio would step in. And that would be a very triggering experience because, Sergio was like the one of the trauma holders. He was like the one that held on to all the rage, and he was the one who made sure everything was quote unquote fair, or what he considered fair. So I described like the differences between Tosh, Dimitri, and Sergio, and like what conflicts arose because of their differences in ideology and their different ways of handling situations. Um, think about that when you're thinking about like creating a DID system, because depending on who your host is and depending on like what alters are in that system and why they came into the system in the first place, like that's all going to factor in to conflicts within the system. So I hope this was informative, and I will catch you guys next time. Take care. And hi, buddy. Wow, hello. Yeah, my sister's cat is here. Probably knows that I'm talking about something that is difficult to talk about. So, yes, that's okay. So, so you made me lose my train of thought.